What's up everyone, Michael here with another topic video. Today we're going to talk about how Alienware executives have mentioned that Windows 10 may have killed the SteamOS, or at least it did on their front lines. Now, I think that I kind of disagree with that a little bit. Obviously, Windows 10 release had a big part in kind of SteamOS losing its kind of momentum, because 3 years later, nobody's using SteamOS anymore. But I also kind of see where they're coming from. You know, it did have a big part of it, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of other problems, and I kind of want to talk about that, kind of branch off into maybe does SteamOS even have a market? And maybe it does, and maybe it has a really strong future. Like, is it dead? Maybe not. We'll see, because Valve kind of likes to do these long-term things. Hashtag Half-Life 3. Yeah. I'm going to stop that joke there. Anyways, game in the background is Monster Super League. It is actually a fantastic mobile game. I'm playing it on an emulator, which means that it has some audio sync issues, and I apologize for that. I'll try to fix it in post so it's not annoying for you guys. It bothers me a little bit, but I normally don't play the game with audio anyways. I'm just normally running while I'm playing something else. But anyways, it's a fantastic little turn-based sort of monster collection game that I enjoy quite a bit, and it's the first mobile game that I've actually played that, one, has a really good art style, while also not trying to screw me over with microtransaction constantly. I'm playing it for free, and it's basically actually allowing me to progress and play. Obviously, it's a little bit grindier. You can speed it up with money, but it actually doesn't have any, like, exclusive things, and it doesn't have anything that's pay to win or anything like that. It's quite fantastic. It's actually refreshing, too, because the developers actually listen to their users and make changes based off of that, so that's actually fantastic. So I'm enjoying it quite a bit. If you watch the Broken Chat Box podcast, I talk more about it in there. I think episode 3 and 4 might have been the ones where I talk about it quite a bit, so go check those out if you can, if you're interested. I'll also be doing a review of it. I've decided I'm going to do my first mobile review, because I actually like it that much, so yeah, it's worth checking out. Anyways, back on topic, so I don't ramble about this game. I could do a whole video on this game. So, Alienware executives, or at least the co-founder of Frank Azor, is quoted on PC Gamer through an interview, has mentioned that I think the landscape 2 years ago was very different from what it is today. And so basically what he's saying, the catalyst for the Steam Machine initiative was really around Microsoft's decision with Windows 8, which Windows 8 was actually a pretty terrible machine. Sorry, I stopped gameplay in the background. I'm reading off a second screen. And so basically, he's saying that, you know, SteamOS was going to be kind of prevalent for their market strategy because Windows 8 was so terrible. You know, Windows 8, I don't think it was that bad. I don't think it was unusable or anything like that, but it was kind of a nightmare to work with. A lot of gamers didn't enjoy it. It had compatibility issues and still does. I mean, Windows 10 is more compatible than Windows 8 was, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. Not that Windows 10 is perfect and doesn't have, you know, compatibility problems either. I run into quite a few around the clock, but at the same time, it's a lot better than Windows 8 in a lot of ways. So yeah, if you're running Windows 8 and not running Windows 10 when it was free to upgrade, I don't understand your mental process on that one. But hey, maybe you have your reasons. I would love to hear those in the comments. But regardless, you know, so Alienware saw that and they're like, yeah, you know what? We need something to replace this. And that's what SteamOS really kind of tried to advertise it on. Also, it tried to advertise itself on the Sofa Gaming OS so that you could play games on your sofa in your living room while also having the power of a gaming PC. That was the entire concept. I don't find that that has a market, and I think that's why it failed rather than Windows 10, because while I understand this, you know, Alienware had to release their machines on Windows when it first announced, because basically they had Steam machines ready to go, and they were like, yeah, we're going to do this, but then Valve had to kind of delay their controller, they had to delay their OS a little bit, and they had all these sort of delays and problems. And so, you know, Alienware, being the company that they are, invest quite a bit of money on getting things out on time, and they have investors that kind of require that, especially when it comes to the manufacturer line. They have to have these things out on time. And so instead, what they did was they refitted it to be on Windows, and they actually found a decent amount of success with it, I guess. They found that their Windows machines, to this day, are still selling better than their SteamOS. And I think there's a few kind of telling reasons for this. One, you know, as I mentioned, I don't think that it has an actual market. I don't think that the SteamOS is something that's going to be strong enough in the concept to actually be like, oh yeah, we need to go out and get this. I think it's going to have a niche kind of market, but I don't think it's something that's going to be prevalent because we have things like Big Picture. Another reason is the fact that it's a base off of Linux. You know, it's kind of a branch off of the Linux tree, which means that, you know, it's got the limitations of Linux, which is quite kind of large, actually. And then, you know, obviously this kind of runs into the fact that not all games are going to be compatible, and this kind of goes into the library of, you know, what can I play on it? And Windows is actually not that bad of a kind of experience when you're playing on a sofa. I mean, there's a lot of different sort of things on top of Windows that you can use, like let's say Steam Big Picture. Steam Big Picture is probably one of the easiest examples to where you're like, you know what? I want to play, this game. I'll just launch it in Steam Big Picture. It automatically full screens it and everything for you. It's actually quite fantastic. I've used it before. I don't have a sofa or, a sofa setup for that, but hey, I like Big Picture regardless. And so, that kind of replaces that need. And there's obviously a lot of different usability things that Windows 10 specifically has as well. Like it has, it has zoom in features, which means you can zoom in on elements, you can magnify the screen, you can make it so the text is bigger and stuff like that. And it works a lot better in Windows 10 than it did in previous versions, but this was also there in previous versions. And I feel like Windows 8 actually wasn't that hard to use from that sort of perspective either, using the whole Metro apps system. Wasn't actually that bad on a sofa. I know that my mother and sister actually used it on their TV for a little while, and they didn't have any problems with it, and they are casual beyond casual. So I don't think it was that actually bad. And I don't necessarily think the market for, let's say, a sofa gaming PC is necessarily that large of a market. I think the media PC market may be larger than that. And at that same point, they're using those media PCs to watch movies and things like that. Stuff that, belongs on a sofa. You could argue that. I disagree with that statement, but you could argue that moment. And so I don't necessarily think it had a market that was beyond niche. A lot of people aren't going to go out and buy a specific machine or build a specific PC to sit on their sofa and play games. They're going to have their main kind of PC that's going to cost them a hell of a lot of more money, but it's going to run better games, and they're going to use streaming solutions, different cord solutions, that sort of thing to end up gaming on their kind of main TV, I guess you could say. I do all my gaming on my monitor, so I guess I don't 100% understand the whole comparison, but at the same time, I don't feel like a lot of people are actually going to be reaching for that. I know from experience, people are fine playing on console on their, TV and stuff like that. A lot of people are, and if they want something better than that, they go to their monitor, and it's a completely different sort of experience. And I do understand there are people that want it, but at the same time, you can just use Windows 10. Or Windows 7 even. Windows 7 isn't that terrible because you have stuff like Steam Big Picture, which actually kind of replaces that need. And you can use a controller for that as well. Windows 10 actually has features to where you can actually bind all of your Windows 10 kind of windows to your controller, which is actually pretty cool. You have to use a third-party program to do it properly, I think, because the built-in way is kind of cheesy in sort of senses. And I actually have a touch control panel as well, because I have a drawing tablet, which means I can use touch inputs to switch windows and things like that, which is even cooler, but not everyone has that, so I understand why that's not part of the argument. But it's actually not that bad of a thing. Now, the second reason is the fact that it's based off of Linux. Now, this kind of goes into more of the technical side of this. SteamOS is based off of Linux, which I already mentioned, which means that it has all of its limitations, which means it's not going to be running full Windows kind of applications. So on Windows 10, let's say you're running a sofa gaming PC and you have Windows 10. This also means that you're going to be able to use whatever Windows 10 can use. And so you're going to be like, oh, you know what? I can do video editing on this thing, and you could do video editing on your sofa. Yeah. Nobody's going to do that, but hey, you could. Or, you're going to be able to do more things like watch movies and things like that. And it's going to be, 100% customizable. And this is the limitations of using a branch of Linux. Now, Linux itself is a very customizable. It's more customizable than Windows. It's more customizable than, definitely more customizable than macOS, which is basically you have a sandbox that's made of concrete. But regardless, Linux itself is very customizable. But the way that SteamOS is kind of built is you can modify it, but at the same time, there's not really much you can do with it without breaking kind of what it is. I know that a lot of people ended up buying Steam machines and just installing Windows on it instead because they wanted that flexibility. And SteamOS just doesn't have that. It has sort of some customization that you can do, but it is focused mostly on being a sofa gaming rig, which isn't necessarily what everyone wants, as I mentioned with the whole market. People want a PC that they hook up to their monitor, or not a monitor, but a TV instead of a monitor, which it's already happens before. You can already do that. I can already hook up my computer to a TV and it'll work right off the gate because it has an HDMI. So that's not really a problem. So people ended up buying these machines. Now, the other limitation is you can't customize the hardware, or at least if you can, it's going to be highly modular. And the way the Alienware did it is you can buy different versions of it and stuff like that. And this is not necessarily something people want to experience. This is just bringing down the kind of console sort of market into the PC gaming space, which for one, I think was kind of the point. They were trying to capture a lot of, like, I don't know, console gamers and bringing them into PC gaming, which I think a lot of them already are, but they're going into PCs. Instead of this, you know, if you're going to bring people into the whole ecosystem of PC gaming, you should bring them into the hardware aspects as well, but I guess that's kind of personal opinion. You know, I feel like if you're PC gaming, you should at least know a little bit about hardware, because it's actually good knowledge to have. So, yeah, you should have that. But regardless, opinions aside, I think that people that are moving over are just going into PCs, and people that bought those machines, they bought them as media PCs because they're actually pretty powerful if you want a media PC. You know, you could run 4K video on that, you could do whatever the hell you want it on, you could multi-stream, you can do a lot of stuff on, you know, a pretty powerful Steam machine, you know, if you have the proper OS. Now, the other problem with it is the fact of game compatibility. This is the main thing that I think killed OS, or SteamOS, is because not everything is compatible with Linux. There's a lot of games out there that are only compatible with Windows, you know, and especially now with Windows 10, they're pushing DirectX 12, which is only available on Windows 10, which is because it ties into the OS and everything. That's a topic for another video. I know people hate it, but you know what? It's going to happen regardless. And so a lot of people are like, you know what? I kind of need to play these games, or at least they think they need to play these games. And so they end up, you know, wanting Windows instead because Linux isn't compatible with a lot of games. Now, SteamOS did do a good job of making some games end up being compatible with Linux, which is actually pretty cool because with the whole SteamOS push, you know, Valve's like, hey, we need games for this, you know, come on, guys. And so a lot of people are like, all right, we'll make a Linux version. So there's actually a lot more Linux games now than there were before because of that, I feel. Or at least, you know, part of the whole Linux rise. Because Linux is on the rise. You know, that is a thing that's happening. But we'll talk about it in a second. But this kind of limited kind of library, I think, really is what killed it. Like, I think that's the number one reason. And I think it's a good idea that, or a good plan, the Alienware is actually pushing more towards using Windows. Because they say, or at least Frank Azor in this interview said that, you know, we're going to be working with Windows because we're in a good spot right now. You know, they're like, hey, you know, this is working for us. We're in a good spot. Why would we switch? I mean, they're a business. I know a lot of people don't like Alienware, but they are a business and they do make decent PCs. I won't say that they're worth the money, but they do make decent PCs and they make some cool looking ones as well. I think that they have some great designers working on some of their PC mods. Not all of them, but quite a few of them. So, you know, they do have that sort of market and they see that Windows is working. So they're like, hey, we're going to stick with this, which may actually spell disaster for SteamOS in the future because SteamOS needs adaptation to really grow. Now, the problem with that is the fact that Valve doesn't necessarily need it to succeed right away. I feel like Valve does this thing because right now they're in a good spot. They kind of have almost a monopoly on the PC game market. You know, if you want to buy a game, you're most likely going to buy it through Steam. There's like a 90% chance that it's going to be through Steam, and there's kind of like a 50% chance it's only available on Steam. So, you know, if you want a specific game, most likely it's going to be on Steam and you're going to buy it. Now, I have personally bought from other vendors as well, especially like indie vendors and things like that. You know, I like to support other options, but at the same time, Steam has so much that it actually brings to the table that I actually think that SteamOS, if it grows large enough, could end up capitalizing on this almost monopoly to kind of actually grow itself. It can be like, hey, we can push developers to make more and more Linux games. Maybe they could start previewing Linux games more often. You know, for example, when they released the SteamOS and the whole Steam Link and everything like that, and they were pushing it really, really hard, they actually had a lot of the Linux games kind of advertised. And so they can be like, yes, this is going to boost your sales, make a Linux version. You know, obviously that's not possible for everyone because of technical limitations. Don't even get me started on it. But they could end up using that power to actually push forward their OS. The problem is, competitors are actually getting pretty strong. Now, I've recently been using Uplay because I got Rainbow Six Siege when it was on sale and everything like that. And so I've been playing that, and that uses Uplay. Uplay is terrible. I absolutely hate it. It took me 4 hours to download a freaking DLC. It is a goddamn nightmare. However, there are other competitors, you know, all of them used to be as bad as Uplay, but other competitors have actually grown quite a bit. And so, like, let's say Origin, for example, which is EA's example or sample. It's actually quite good. Like, it's actually a good, like, program now. Like, the storefront works very flawlessly. I've had no problems with the overlay. I don't like the account linking features that they have. I think they're kind of a little bit iffy in some senses, especially since you can't hide it to a public view, which is kind of strange. You either hide everything or you only hide... Or you either hide nothing or you hide everything. Sorry, I don't know why it took me so long to process that information. Also, I'm getting screwed up in this dungeon. I probably went a little bit higher level than I should have, so I'm having a little bit of trouble. I should have brought 2 more water Astromons. Anyways, so I think that one problem that they're having, you know, Windows Store obviously is terrible right now, but it is getting better progressively. You know, it is getting progressively better and better, and they're, you know, figuring out all the Windows app problems. And I think Valve might actually need to push SteamOS soon before it ends up dying. Now, the other thing about SteamOS is that since it is a kind of tree of Linux, as Linux improves, so does SteamOS. And its limitations will be decreasing over and over and over again as iterations of Linux comes out, which means they can update the whole, you know, SteamOS to do better and better. And I think this is their benefit, but at the same time, I think they need to push hard for this sort of thing to actually end up being in the future. Because I don't feel like it's going to have a very strong chance in the long running when Linux actually gets all these other trees and becomes more user-friendly for everyone else. Because there's a lot of situations where people are not using Linux right now because it's so complicated to start up. It's really not, but people have that perception and everything like that. And so they're like, you know what, I don't want to get into it. And quite frankly, they don't have a reason to. You know, Windows works perfectly fine. And it's also more compatible and has a lot more features than, you know, Linux does. So that's kind of one of the main killers. But as Linux grows, it'll get better and better. But at the same time, people are going to have less and less reasons to actually move to a SteamOS and a dedicated Sofa OS. I mean, Windows 10 works perfectly fine for everyone that I've talked to when they're looking for a Sofa gaming rig. They're like, yeah, Windows 10 just works. It's fine. There's some scaling issues when you go out to 4K, but as Windows 10 gets patched, it's getting better and better. And there's different types of workarounds. There's different types of programs like Steam Big Picture. I talked to one guy who's like, yeah, I use Steam Big Picture all the time. I love it. And he was actually playing on his machine. This was actually on Rainbow Six Siege, which is weird. He was playing with the controller, which makes me think that he may not have been the best comparison for this. But regardless, people that are playing on their sofas, they don't need a specific OS just to do that. We already have the compatibility to do so, and quite well. And, you know, there's obviously a bunch of programs that are compatible with the gamepad. You know, you can use, you know, just Windows kind of mouse emulation with a gamepad as well, which works perfectly fine. I've used it before. And so, I don't think there's a market for it. That's kind of my conclusion on that, is like, I don't know if SteamOS is going to be around forever. I think that it might end up failing. Unless they end up pushing it, I think it'll always be there. Like, it'll be in the background, but I don't think it'll ever be prevalent. And I think Alienware kind of has a point with Windows 10 kind of killing SteamOS and the fact that, you know, it did end up kind of replacing that niche market. Like, I think a lot of people that were in that niche market are like, hey, we need to, like, do this and stuff like that. And they're like, yeah, you know what? Maybe we don't. You know, because they're like, SteamOS isn't really having that market anymore. There is no niche for it, which means that basically Windows 10 just completely replaced the niche, but at the same time, like, it didn't necessarily need Windows 10 to be there because there wasn't that many people in that niche to begin with. So, yeah, I think Alienware kind of has a point, but at the same time, I disagree with that being the reason why it failed. I think that Windows 7 or Windows 8 even was always going to kind of outshine it because just compatibility in the game libraries and yada yada, stuff that I mentioned in this video. But at the same time, yeah, I think it's smart that Alienware is kind of moving just to Windows PCs. So, yeah, that was kind of a dragged out topic. I don't know where I was necessarily going with that, but I thought it was interesting to talk about, you know. SteamOS itself was very interesting to me when I saw it because I'm like, you know what? That could be a thing. I could see people, you know, I always want people to get into PC gaming. I think there's a lot you can learn from PC gaming, and there's a lot of availability. Like, PC gaming allows you to kind of grow beyond your basic gaming needs, you know, and consoles, especially these days, are just so god-awful, which, like, the Wii U is no longer in production, which I have another video coming up on. And so, like, yeah, consoles are not that great, so everyone should move to PCs so that we don't have to live with the limitations of console anymore, because console is kind of ruining a lot of this sort of, you know, gaming forever sort of thing. You know, there's a lot of games that I can no longer play because they were on older consoles. I don't think that should be a thing. I don't think you should lock away things, but yeah. Anyways, that's a whole nother topic. Let's go ahead and end this one. My name has been Michael, and I've been here with a topic video talking about how Alienware executives think that Windows 10 may have actually killed the SteamOS, which I obviously somewhat disagree with, but I also see their point. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this one, and also check out my reviews, and do check out the Broken Chat Box podcast, which has actually been doing quite fantastic. We've had some great episodes, and we've had some great guests on that show. It's actually pretty great. And I also talk about Super Monster League in a few of the episodes. I think I mentioned it every single podcast because I'm always playing it. I don't know why I like this game so much. It's a turn-based game, and it's quite simple, as you see in the background. I'm mostly playing with the same team. I probably should have switched up the team a little bit more, and I apologize for that, but I'm just kind of like randomly playing while I'm talking and stuff like that. And I'm also trying not to move too much because my back hurts, but I always move when I talk, so I'm in a lot of pain right now, which hurts. Ow! Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and obviously, leave your comments down, you know. Leave your comments in the thoughts, or your thoughts in the comments. I said that backwards. I'm starting to slur my words now. I'm interested to see what you guys think. Is there anybody that actually used the SteamOS? Because I've seen it, and I've used it for a little while, but at the same time, it's like I dual booted it. It didn't have anything that I wanted, that I needed, especially since I don't game on a sofa, I game in a monitor. Maybe some of you guys game on a sofa and you disagree with me that Windows 10 works perfectly fine. Maybe Steam Big Picture is not good enough for you, and so you're like, you know what, I need to move to something better, and maybe SteamOS is that. I don't know. Do you guys even know what SteamOS is? I don't even know how many people actually know what it is these days. Like, it's kind of not talked about. It's not shunned, but it's just nobody talks about it. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Adios.